Next up, we have an interview with Jordan Wylie, MBE, an extreme adventurer and Sunday Times best-selling author. Welcome, Jordan.
Hello, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. A real privilege to be here on this special day. So thank you for inviting me on.
No, we are so lucky to have you with us. Jordan, just for our viewers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from England, from a place called Blackpool in the UK. I joined the military actually at 16 years old as a frontline sort of combat soldier, and I spent 10 years there. And I guess that was my first real introduction to conflict around the world, having served on operations in places like Iraq, and seeing the firsthand I guess the destruction that war and conflict does to communities, to lives, and so forth. And I guess since I left the army after 10 years, for the last decade and a bit longer, I've been going back to conflict zones, using adventure as a way to support people in conflict zones, to raise funds, to help children access education, to champion important causes and campaigns and things. And yeah, I love adventure. I love the outdoors, and I try to use it with a purpose, I guess.
Did you know already, did you have in mind while you were there, while you were serving in all those conflict areas and the things you saw, did you know that once you get back to reality, to real life, that you will take on that kind of a journey?
No, absolutely not. You know, when I was on my first tour of Iraq in 2005, I was involved in quite a few different incidents, but one really prominent incident where I tragically witnessed the death of a young boy, a little boy, and it was something that really stayed with me and has stuck with me ever since. And I realized that even though I come from quite a tough background in the UK, actually I was still very privileged compared to a lot of children in the world. And it really opened my eyes. And I made a promise to myself, about 15, 16 years ago, that I was going to do all I could if I ever got the opportunity to try and help children in some of these places. Because for me, children are the ultimate victims of a conflict or war anywhere in the world. They're a victim of circumstances, of the lottery of life. And I find that really difficult to process still. It's still what keeps me awake at night these days. And I guess it's why I do what I do, for children in conflict zones.
Yeah, I totally get it. So my next question is, because what you said now, so we hear it's Peace Day live, and so what does this mean to you? What does Peace Day mean to you?
It's a great question. I think for me as a former soldier and a humanitarian, Peace One Day, World Peace Day, International Peace Day, it holds profound significance, because for me it represents a beacon of hope and a reminder of the ideals that we should all continually strive for as a global community. I think it's a day where we have to pause and sort of reflect on the devastating consequences of conflict and war and violence, and hopefully reaffirm our dedication to building a more peaceful world. But I think today is an opportunity for everybody to come together from all walks of life and sort of transcend those boundaries and differences and work towards that really important common goal, which is a world free of extreme violence, in my opinion. I think it's also a day that emphasizes the importance of diplomacy, of dialogue, and non-violent conflict resolution. But also for me, it's a bit like Remembrance Day in the UK, or Armistice Day, or on the 11th of November we have Remembrance Day for the military in the UK and the veterans. And it's a bit like that for me, because it's also a time to reflect and pay our respects to all those that have lost their lives in wars and conflicts around the world. And I don't just mean those fighting as soldiers or in the military. I mean those really who are the collateral of war and conflict, the humanitarians, the women, the children, and all those people who are caught in the midst of war, which is really difficult.
Many times we tend to forget that there are civilians and casualties and collateral damage between countries and between politicians and between fight for power. But we were talking about peace globally, but in order to find peace globally, one need to find peace, I think, within, maybe. So my next question to you is, what does peace mean to you, and how do you find it?
I think, to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I do my adventures around the world. I really love being immersed in nature, in the natural world. It brings me a sort of, on a personal level, it brings me a level of solitude through the simple things in life. I love being out in the mountains. I love being on the ocean, in the countryside, and I sort of call it blue or green therapy, because there is something really tranquil about being in the natural environment for me. And I have my own struggles with things like mental health. I found, some really tough challenges in my personal life and professional life. And some of those, of course, come from spending a lot of time and seeing death and destruction firsthand. And I escape from that by going into the natural world. As I say, I love nothing more than being on the ocean, in the ocean, or near the ocean. It has soothing sort of remedies for me, and it's my happy place in the world. But I think on a global context, when I think of peace, for me, it's a world where we all appreciate the true value of life, where we're all willing to accept each other for our differences and our beliefs, but yet still try and forge a path together as a global community.
I mean, you mentioned mental health, and you've been a soldier, so you know a lot about suffering and darkness and hard and tough issues to cope with. And all around me, I see people now that they are suffering. They battle mental health. They battle the everyday now, because our world is not an easy place. Where do you draw your hope from? What can you tell these people that are struggling themselves now?
It is very difficult, and it's such an important subject, mental health. As I say, I've struggled hugely, and quite recently too. Life can be very challenging sometimes, but I think for me, what gets me through is I try to use what would be my perceived negative experiences from the past. I try to have a sense of gratitude for life. I'm still very lucky. I'm healthy. I'm living. I'm breathing, and certainly many of my friends from the military, colleagues, heroes, in fact, that have paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country, they would do anything to have a few more breaths or another conversation with their family. So I try to take a real sense of gratitude from that when things are tough for me, because I'm very lucky to still be here in many respects. And I think, we have to talk to people as well. We have to talk to our loved ones. We have to share our problems. And I guess, when you take that on a global context, it's no different than when we talk about things like diplomacy and trying to build peace, because whether you're building peace on a global scale or building peace within you, it's about finding that solitude, that happy place, that middle ground, that compromise. And it's not always easy, but certainly for me, the outdoors, talking to people, and also writing as an author, I find it a lot easier to express my thoughts and feelings through the written word sometimes than the spoken word. So yeah, different things work for different people, but that's what I tend to use.
To those individuals that are watching us now and thinking, I'm just one person. I mean, what can I really do? How can I really make a difference? What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's really important to remember that even as individuals, we all hold the power to make a meaningful difference in the pursuit of global peace. There is a common belief that, I'm just one person, so what can I do? But it's essential to recognize that positive change often begins with the actions of individuals, and history has taught us that. So I think, what can you do? How can you start? Well, I think firstly, educating yourself, because knowledge is a powerful tool for change. Educate yourself on some of the root causes of conflicts, both on a local level and and in the global context. Understand, the complexities of the issues related to peace and justice. Because I think more informed individuals are much better equipped to be able to advocate for peaceful solutions. And when you understand more about the challenges that arise in conflict zones and war zones around the world, it becomes much clearer for about what you can do to support people in those positions as well. I think as well, be a good role model in your daily life. Simple things, whether there's children or adults listening to this, be a model for peace in your daily life. Show others how conflicts can be resolved through, dialogue and compromise and empathy. be a role model for a kind of peaceful coexistence, whether that's not on the huge global conflict scale, but also in school, in college, in your workplace. Let's be good role models and ambassadors for the rest of the world, I think.
I mean, you mentioned role model. We just talked about that now, and I was wondering, who was your role model? Do you have anyone that actually inspired you to make a difference?
Oh, do you know this? I have so many role models, but for me, I would like to on the global stage. I would love to champion my father, my dad. He was also in the military. He was a Royal Marine who served in the Falklands conflict, and he lives by his values, things like courage, respect, integrity, loyalty, discipline. So they're similar values what I try to carry. I think values guide our behavior in life, and I've tried to use the values that both the military and my father taught me to have a positive impact, hopefully, on the world.
As I said, reality is not that shining on anyone right now. But if there's one thing that you'd like to see happening in relation to humanity's survival, what would it be?
I think for me, I would love to see children have access to more opportunities. I see so much suffering in the world for children on my travels. I've spent the last 10 years in and out of places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Libya, so many different parts of the world. I came back from the Ukraine recently, and often, as I said earlier, I think children are often the ultimate victims of a conflict. Because even as adults, we have the option to fight for our country or stand up and be counted, or we can flee and try and escape the troubles if we think that's the right decision. But as children, as I say, you're a victim of the lottery of life. You're a victim of circumstance, and the statistics and the data surrounding children that have been displaced in conflict zones is horrifying. It's horrific. More than 1/3 of the world's children will never go to primary school. They will never have access to the basics in education. And I'm not even talking about good education. I'm just talking about education in its most basic form. It is truly horrifying what children have to experience, and the challenges, not only of being a child in a conflict zone at the time, but afterwards as well. They have to live with that trauma, those memories, those experiences for the rest of their life, and for me it's soul destroying and something that I struggle to process. I think as a soldier, I saw a lot of bad things happen to people who were alongside me. I've looked death in the face many times, but to see it happen to children, that, as I say, that still keeps me awake at night. I can't process that. I find it incredibly difficult, to be truly honest. So I would love to see the global community on the international stage do a lot more for children in conflict and war zones and post-conflict zones around the world.
I think there's a lot that is dependent on the next generation, on kids. But kids today are educated by social media most of the time. And you were just talking about how important it is to educate yourself. So for those, parents for children that are watching us now, or kids that are actually watching us, where would you recommend for them to get the proper education, the proper information about what's going on? And how do you think it's best for them to share it?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think, social media has a lot of great benefits to the world, but it also can be a problem sometimes. It also can be the spread of misinformation as well. And certainly one thing that I've learned in my life is if you want to know the truth, you have to travel, you have to speak to people, you have to immerse yourself in different cultures. It's the best education. If I'd have just listened to the media, I would have never gone to many of the conflict zones that I visited. But having spent a lot of time in certainly Iraq and Afghanistan as a former British soldier, I can tell you that most of the people in the world are good people. Actually, most of the people in the world want peace. And I've seen more acts of kindness, more acts of humanity, more acts of love and compassion in conflict zones around the world than I've seen in my own country here in England. It's something that if I just watched the news and listened to the news, I would have never have left my home. But I travel to a lot of conflict zones, and I'm not suggesting everyone should travel to them at all. Obviously, that's not a great idea, but often the reality on the ground is often different than the media perception, because there's often a political agenda or narrative that people are forcing.
Thank you so much for your words and for inspiring us. Take care.